Hello and welcome to part two of this lecture series on structuring the rhetorical analysis essay. This part will cover writing your introduction. So part one of this series talked you through this important sort of overview of the rhetorical context for and the rhetorical situation for your text that you're analyzing. So hopefully if you've done that with the JFK speech that we're working with here, that you have something like this in front of you. And this is really important because these pieces, now the creation of a serviceable introduction requires the integration of these pieces that you have identified here. And I want to stress this again. The introduction that this guide brings into existence is a serviceable introduction. It does all the work that's necessary to be sure that you have the pieces in place to write your essay. There's nothing necessarily artistic about it. There's nothing necessarily subtle about it or nuanced. But it is a basic structure for an introduction. So use this until you get comfortable with it, and certainly consider this when you're going into a situation like the AP exam where you don't know for sure what it is you'll face, and you have a very limited amount of time in order to create a meaningful, serviceable introduction. So with this information that we have here from our SOAPs analysis, we can now reformulate the information into a framework to create an introduction. And the way that would work is to begin with stating the writer's credentials, tell us something about who they are, include his or her first and last name, possibly include the title and the type of text that's being used, and then hit us with a strong verb, and then put the subject right there in the beginning. So this example here on the right side is for Amy Tan's narrative essay, Fish Cheeks. And it says, novelist Amy Tan, in her narrative essay, Fish Cheeks, recounts an embarrassing Christmas Eve dinner when she was 14 years old. And then, so that tells us who it is, what we're reading, and what it's about in a literal sense. Then the next thing to do is to state directly and powerfully what the author's or the writer's or the speaker's purpose is. Writer's last name purpose is to, and then give us that purpose, probably with a verb. Get that verb in there and tell us what it is that writer hopes to achieve through the writing or the speaking of this text. Notice it says writer's last name. This is not always a problem for writers, but sometimes those who are entering into this academic writing context, they don't realize that it is convention in academic writing to refer to an author either by their full name or by simply their last name. We don't usually refer to authors of texts or speakers of speeches as by their first name. It's just a sort of convention, a show of respect. It's one of those things that you kind of catch on to as you read more texts like this. So in the context of Amy Tan's essay, Tan's purpose is to convey the idea that at 14, she wasn't able to recognize the love her mother had for her or the sacrifices she made. So we get an idea that she is trying to convey an idea. We get this statement of theme. And we sort of have that there as we move forward. And then in the last section, he or she adopts and here's where you are going to decide, at least in this framework, what's the overall tone in the author's writing. He or she describes an adjective describing the attitude, and then tone and then here's what where we put a verb phrase describing what they want to happen in the audience in order to verb phrase describing what the writer wants the readers to do or think in his or her, and then say what that audience is. So here we have, she adopts a sentimental tone in order to appeal to similar feelings and experiences in her adult readers. So it's more specific that you can be there. You choose their appeal to similar feelings. So you are pointing to some of the strategies that you might be going to analyze later in your essay. You give us that tone, which you can make reference back to as you start looking at specific diction and strategies from the text itself. And this is a really sort of, it's a straightforward, serviceable text that you can use. So now go back to your SOAPs chart that you created for JFK and see if you can use this structure to write a meaningful introduction to an essay that you would be composing, analyzing JFK's rhetorical strategies in the speech that we've read. Pause the video now to do that, and then hit play again when you're done practicing. Okay, so hopefully you have a paragraph in front of you, and your introduction may not be exactly like mine, but here's an idea of a way that this might be put together. So you can see that I chose to write this introduction paragraph. President John F. Kennedy, in his speech of April 11, 1962, addresses the recent hike in steel prices. With this speech, Kennedy aims to criticize the decision by steel companies to raise their prices. He adopts a stern tone, reflecting on the sacrifices of the country at large in order to demonize the steel companies and to galvanize the support of the American people for his cause. And so yours may be different. You may have chosen a slightly different way of putting this into words. Hopefully you've chosen some strong verbs in there. You can see that I chose addresses and then criticizes and then demonizes and then galvanizes. So I use those 4 different verbs in order to sort of build to my point that I think that President Kennedy is trying to achieve here in this speech. Okay. In the next section, the next one of these videos, I'll talk about a method for breaking the text apart and identifying sections of the text to analyze. And then after that, we'll practice by writing a body paragraph. See you soon.